All right, welcome everybody to the Curtain Call. My name is Shayne Kubas, contributor to Still Curtain and co-host of the Still Curtain podcast. And joining me today is Tommy Jaggi, editor of Still Curtain and host of the Still Curtain podcast. Tommy, this time we get to come off and do this show off of a win, as ugly as it was. So we're gonna have a little bit more energy, I feel like, this week, a little bit more fun with it. Even though, again, it was kind of a disaster overall, right? This game, I feel like a lot of people watching, neither Monday night game was super we say offensive forward. We'll put it that way. There's a couple big plays in both games, but yeah, this was an ugly one. It's early in the season, so we'll see if we can get some better primetime games. But this one was not particularly pretty. What would you say?
Oh my goodness, it was so sloppy from
Yeah,
start to finish. I mean, both teams, both sides of the ball, and so definitely not that like premier matchup that you hope for. You hope to see a little bit more of a cleaner game than that, and some people will chalk it up to, well, this is AFC North football at its finest. So I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit today too.
yeah, that's actually the first thing I want to get into. So our first little topic here is an AFC North masterclass or just bad football, right? Like that's kind of I think
Mm-hmm.
the question. I know a lot of people I was talking to during the game, and we're in the chats and stuff on Twitter that we have for the Still Curtain, everything like that, and a lot of people were just kind of going back and forth between, oh, this is good hard nosed football, AFC North, and then other people like myself, I'll be honest, was just like, this might just be bad football. I mean, these two teams defensively definitely made some big plays. There's a lot of good moments, but even the defenses had their struggles. We'll talk about that here in a second. But do you think this was more like truly an AFC North like slugfest type game, or was this just kind of bad football from both teams?
No, on a scale, Shayne, it's way closer to the bad and just
Yeah,
downright ugly side, really, because I mean, we've seen in the past, and I know you're a little bit young, but when you go back to like the early 2000s, Ravens versus Steelers, like that type of football, like that is peak AFC North
yeah.
right there. That is not what we got on Monday Night
No,
Football. The Steelers versus Browns, it was so sloppy. The quarterback play was so bad. I mean, the offensive line play was bad, and so there was it left a lot to be desired still too. You'd like to see a little bit more of a clean game in those big moments, but I mean, some of the sloppiness benefited the Steelers. Obviously, they came away with a
yeah.
win with the two defensive scores, but no, definitely not the finest AFC North football I've seen.
Yeah, again, I think people view the AFC North very similarly to what they did back in the 2000s as they do now because of how strong the teams are. The problem
Mhm.
is it's not the same type of football. We don't play football quite the same way that we did back then. And I'm not going to sit here and say it's better or worse or whatever. That's up to the individual person. But what we got today, or I should say last night, is not what AFC North football traditionally is. This was two teams offensively who were simply just bad, and the defenses took advantage of it multiple times. Deshaun Watson, that has been just, well, like, I think we could say it at this point. I think a lot of Browns fans would agree. It's been a disaster so far, right? It's just,
Yeah.
he is not the same player that he was prior to everything that's happened with him and everything that he's done and what he did in Houston beforehand. That guy just doesn't feel like he's walking through the door.
Mhm.
And if that's the case, you have a $230 million contract for a guy that might, depending on how bad he really gets, might not even be the best quarterback on their team. I really like the DTR pick for them.
Mhm.
Like, if something happened to Watson, I really truly don't believe he would be that much of a downgrade at this point, even as a rookie. Like, and it's not just because Deshaun Watson's been bad. I do think I think highly of that kid, but overall, like, this has just been an unmitigated disaster. And now, obviously, we have to talk about the Nick Chubb injury, which was really gruesome. And there's been a lot of talk about Minka and whether he was trying. Like, I obviously don't think Minka was trying to hurt him. This is a game where when you're trying to tackle Nick
Mhm.
Chubb, you don't really have any other option other than to go low if you want to do anything. And it sucks. I'm sure Minka feels bad. And, we're hoping he's also feeling well because of the chest
Mhm.
injury. I haven't heard anything about that recently, but it for the Browns, like, without Nick Chubb, especially if he is going to be out the whole year, which obviously we kind of all knew he was once we unfortunately saw that clip of his injury.
Yeah.
They're going to, even though Jerome Ford made some really big plays for them, he had that really long run thanks to Levi Wallace, who I don't even want to really talk about him right now. We will, but even with him in there, if he plays well, like, they cannot rely on the ground game the way that they have the past couple of years. So Watson is going to have to step it up, and
Mhm.
so far it just hasn't shown that he can. Right?
Oh yeah, I mean Jerome Ford. I'm sure he can be a solid fill-in
Yes,
as
I
as
really
what you
do
can
think so.
expect from
Yeah.
like a running back too. Like I think that
Yes.
he'll be good in that regard. But replacing a Nick Chubb is not easy. I mean, and maybe
Yeah. It
next
just
to
doesn't
Christian
happen.
McCaffrey, the best running back in the league, and so he has been one of the best in the league for quite some time now. And so just such a stable presence
Yeah.
to that team. He suffered a major injury way back during his Georgia days and has been
Mm-hmm.
pretty healthy since then. So this
Yeah.
is a big setback for his career. Unfortunately, we'll see how he bounces back next year from this, but it'll be at least until then that we see him. But in the meantime, like you talked about Deshaun Watson. I mean, what happened to the Deshaun Watson of the Houston Texans, the guy that had the 100 passer rating, the one that was leading his team to 10 plus wins and getting the Pro Bowl appearances? Like, this does not look like a shade of that former player. And the game last night was just so bizarre, Shayne. Like, he took 6 sacks. A lot of them were on his own. He had 2 face mask calls on himself. He ran into the referee, shoved him out of the way. I'm like, you're doing all the things wrong that you don't want to see your $230 million quarterback do. And so Browns fans have a big reason to be nervous right now. And Kenny Pickett did not play well either. And so the Steelers have far less of an investment, like 120th overall pick. It's a lot easier to get out of that than it is Deshaun Watson's first fully guaranteed contract ever in the NFL. And I just don't know what they're going to do. Like, if he continues to struggle, I don't know how they move forward with this guy as their quarterback if he plays as bad as they did. They were fortunate in week 1 that their defense was so outstanding against Joe Burrow that they didn't have to kind of have like a shootout match there. They were able to just cruise to victory. They only allowed 3 points, but my goodness, when these games get tight like this, is he going to be able to make enough plays? Is he going to be able to avoid the fumbles and costly sacks and turnover worthy plays? And so I have no confidence that Watson's going to be that guy for the Browns, but at the same time, we got a scary situation going on as well, Shayne.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Pickett a little bit later here in the show, but yeah, we definitely both have some questions at quarterback so far to start the year. But I will say before we move on to some other things here and talk more about some other things, Deshaun Watson, for me, I think the 2 biggest issues for him so far since he's come back, last year they could just say, okay, it's rust. He hasn't played in almost 2 years. He didn't get to play at the start of the year, all that stuff, right? Learning a new offense, whatever it is, right? Now at this point, I do think it really truly is an issue with him as a player, and it's twofold. I think, one, the confidence that he played with in Houston just does not exist right now, right? He does not have that air about him as a player that can get out of anything, can make something happen, can be a playmaker. He just doesn't have it right now. He's in his head, I think, a little bit. He wants to prove that, one, that he can come back to being the player he was, and also that he's the person that people thought he was prior to his incidents and everything. And then also, I just don't think he's a great fit for this offense. Like, you go back to his Houston days, so much of what he did was as a playmaker, right? Like, he could throw within structure. It's not that he can't do any of those things, but he was a playmaker first and foremost. And with Stefanski's offense, and any offense that's a tree from that Shanahan system, a lot of it is timing, hitting throwing windows on time, doing all this stuff. And last night, like, there was throwing windows that he missed multiple times by being late, double clutching, like stuff like that. And like, if he's on time, those throws are probably completed for big gains. He wasn't a lot of the time, and because of that, they weren't caught, right? Like, that's really the difference between scoring 30 plus points probably yesterday and scoring 22. And then and then with all that, you talk about the penalties. I think that's part of the being in his head thing and everything else. And then again, you scored more points for the Steelers than they scored. Like, you gave them more points than the Steelers offense scored. You can't do that against teams that are that bad offensively that they can't score with you, even with you not playing well. You spot them 14 points, you're going to lose. Now, granted, the interception was bounced up, and it was still not a great throw, but it could have been caught. But the fumble sack, like the sack fumble for a touchdown from TJ and Alex, like, that type of stuff is how you lose football games in the AFC North like this when both offenses are struggling, right? So overall, if you're the Browns, you got to be worried about the situation. Like I said, twofold now with Chubb being out. And if you're the Steelers, you're happy to get away with the win. But like you said, and we're going to talk about him in a little bit here, Kenny Pickett himself did not exactly inspire a ton more confidence than he did in week 1. So, but let's move on to what really saved the game for the Steelers, what allowed them to win this game. And of course, it's the Steelers pass rush. It's still their bread and butter, right? Like, this team still runs primarily off their ability to pressure the quarterback, to create turnovers with their pass rushers. TJ Watt has been one of the best in the NFL at forcing fumbles for years now. Montravius Adams forced a fumble to stop a 4th down in this game, which is good for him. Didn't really do a whole lot outside of that, but he still at least made that play. And Alex Highsmith, of course, with the big interception for a touchdown, and then the big sack fumble that TJ Watt picked up and scored on. So this team overall, their pass rush players, their defensive line overall still was the reason why they won. What do you think about it?
Yeah, I think fans were asking that question a lot this past offseason, right? Why sign and Alex Highsmith, maybe that edge 2 type to
Right.
$17 million a year. And we just found out why you pay a combined
exactly
$45 million per season to your top 2 pass rushers, because Highsmith is a good football player. He may never be in that top, like upper echelon tier, but my goodness, I mean, one of his very few dropbacks in that game, he makes something happen. And he's just got that killer instinct to his game. I feel like in terms of getting out to quarterback and then just getting his hands on the balls. I mean, we saw that with the forced fumbles last year, time for the league in forced fumbles. And so those 2 players together, and I'm sure he's learned a lot of that from his counterpart over there. So who has been the biggest splash playmaker since coming to the league in 2017. Obviously, I'm talking about TJ Watt. And so the 2 of those guys just so important to the success of this football team. Like if you take them away from the Steelers right now, there's a case to be made. They're the least talented team in football. Unfortunately, Hayward missing, Deontay missing. I mean, those guys, they really stepped up in a big way. You do not win that game without probably both of those defensive touchdowns that they had. I mean, the first one was on the very first play of the game, jumped him out to the lead. That was Highsmith's pick 6. And then TJ's came at an opportune time right late in the football game where they were able to take the lead with that and then kind of just sit on the lead and play some decent defense. And that was all she wrote. But at the same time, Shane, it's really scary that your defense scored 14 points, your offense scored 12 in this game. And so you can't rely on these types of plays all the time. It's awesome that they do it every once in a while and they get those big splash plays. But at the same time, this is not a recipe for success. This is not repeatable. It's not sustainable. The rest of the team needs to kind of step up and do their job. But hats off to Highsmith. I thought Highsmith even outplayed TJ Watt in this one.
Yeah,
now,
I would say so overall, but it was still
it was very close. Yeah. You go back and I watched the game again Monday morning, Tuesday morning. It was a Monday night game, like I typically do, and Watt was just chipped all the time, And this is again something that irritates me a little bit about Terry Lawson's defense is where Watt is lining up every single play, essentially what he's doing every single play. And so if you want to send somebody over to chip on him, you can. And that's not what we saw with Jim Schwartz last night in the Browns defense. They moved Garrett around. They had him rush up the middle. He got some quick pressure that way. I wish we'd be a little bit more creative with our pass rushers, but at the same time, I kind of get the strategy where if it's not broke, don't fix it. In terms of the pass rush ability, that isn't broke so far. The Steelers have shown that in the first 2 games. It's come primarily just from those 2 players. And I want to see them limit their snaps a little bit because these guys are going to get exhausted by the end of the year if they're asked to do this much. And so the rest of the team just needs to step up around them, but great performance by Highsmith and Watt last night.
Yeah, and I will say, like, even Golden got in there a couple times to help out.
Yeah.
Herbig had a pressure where I think that was
probably would have been a sack if he didn't have the face mask.
Exactly. Yeah, he had that opportunity. Larry Joby played very well in the interior. He had a sack, I know, as well. Like overall, like the pass rush as a whole really made a huge impact. And Watson did make it even worse for himself by just not really being aware of himself on the field and trying to extend too long and all this stuff. But still, they were constantly harassing him, and it really helped because the run defense just didn't show up again. And it's unfortunate because they had their moments, but again, like especially the forward run, like Chubb was going to get his. I wasn't really that upset about much of his. Now, granted, there's a couple where they're in the backfield. You have to find a way to get this guy down. I know it's Nick Chubb, all that stuff. But again, like the Browns were getting in the backfield and they were tackling Najee because they were tackling him low and getting him on the ground immediately by his legs.
Yeah.
That wasn't what they were doing to Chubb early on. And then, of course, what happens with Chubb, he comes out. And then Ford has the biggest play was that long run that, again, I've been talking about Levi Wallace. He just doesn't need to be on the field, Tommy. Really, it's not what we're talking about here, but like we will talk more about him. But again, he's the contained guy on that play, right? He's the guy that has to force him back either inside or just keep him from getting the edge like he did. And he's, one, not fast enough to play loose like that. And 2, just wasn't doing his job, right? And at some point, I don't care if you're a veteran. I don't care if you were okay last year. Joey Porter Jr., who, again, granted, there was possibly, I will say possibly, a bit of a hold there at the end. But he plays coverage way stickier than anyone else on this team currently does. And, yeah, he's not a good run defender. But at least if he's not going to be a good run defender, at least he does something well on the field. Levi does not do anything well on the field right now, right?
Well, you look at that play, you're talking about that play, the 69-yard run from Jerome Ford. That's 100% on Wallace. That is, I mean, he could not have played that any worse. Like he's bottled up in the backfield.
Yes.
Go in and finish him off. And at the very, very least, Stay contained.
Yes.
Don't let him get outside of you. He kind of stood around the line of scrimmage, kind of thinking that, I don't know, play was over, whatever. And then he lets Ford get outside of him, and he's got room to run. And obviously Wallace is so slow at this point. Ran a 4.63 coming out. He might be a 4.7 guy at this point. I don't know.
Yeah.
He certainly didn't look like he had any makeup speed right there. And so that play and that lack of discipline right there on the part of Levi Wallace, that really got the Browns, gave them an extra spark and got them back into that game. And so that's where Steelers, if they could have got him off the field there, I mean, it could have been a different game where maybe you cruise a little bit easier to victory. But yeah, I'm not impressed with Wallace at all. I thought he was horrendous in week 1 against Brandon Ayuk. Just one of the worst coverage games that I've seen from a cornerback in a while. And then again, last night is just another just shoddy performance on his part. And I'm totally ready to make the switch. I was ranting about that last night.
Yeah, and it's just at some point he's overmatched against guys like Amari Cooper and Brandon Ayuk and a lot of these really talented wide receivers. And there's more and more every year coming in the league that, again, like Wallace is a guy that you appreciate that he's been able to make a career for himself, for a guy that had his story where he was a player that had to walk on Alabama and all that other stuff, and just his career story. He's done a good job for himself, but at some point, it's just, it's not going to work. And I think that's kind of the point we're reaching with him. And it is unfortunate, but again, that's why the pass rush is so important, because this back end has a lot of questions still. And you're hoping, Joey can be one of the answers to that. But, there's always been a debate about coverage versus pass rush. And the thing about it is coverage is technically more important in my opinion, but it's there's more variance to it than there's pass rush. So pay your pass rushers and rent your corners, right? If you have to choose one or the other, if you can get, guys that can consistently play well, that's great. But, playing corner is hard enough. Trying to play corner really well all the time just doesn't really happen for most guys. So again, the pass rush, still the bread and butter of this defense, the reason why we won this game. And probably is going to be the reason why we win a lot of games this year, unfortunately. As much as that is not what you want necessarily, you don't want to have to rely on these guys so much. It's just probably what's going to happen. Speaking of which, the reason why we had to rely so much on them is the offense still didn't really do a whole lot. And Kenny Pickett made more plays overall, but when will the consistency come? That's the thing that's worried me so far. Is, you look at some of the plays he made in this game, it felt like he couldn't string together 2 plays in a row, right? So there'd be a wild miss, or the interception, for example, where he just straight up doesn't see Grant Delpit crashing down on the slant pass on one of his first few passes. The misses on inside throws and the slants, just not going through his progressions at times, all that stuff. Now, he was under a lot of pressure, and apparently Dan Moore, and I think you tweeted about it, had like a 3.5 pass block grade from PFF.
3.5.
Yeah, I'm not a PFF guy necessarily. I don't put a lot of stock into the grades, but if you got a 3.5 grade on something, you probably weren't good, right? Like I can confidently say, in watching the game, he was not very good. Myles Garrett's stat line didn't look impressive, but he was certainly getting pressure. Right? They were able to keep him from making big plays, but really by the skin of their teeth. This was not a dominant performance by any means from Dan Moore or any of the other tackles. So just again, he made some more plays, which is good. And the offense made more plays for him, right? Jaylen Warren was great as a receiver. Some of the stuff he did in that regard. The running game really never, until the end of the game, that Najee finally had a couple lanes to run with, and he had the one cutback run that was awesome. And the problem with the running game at this point is, you can sit here and say, Najee isn't playing well. He's had 3 explosive runs now this year, and it's mostly been whenever, again, they just give him some amount of space. Like early in the game, there was somebody tackling him around his ankles every single run play in the backfield. It was just dreadful. And Jaylen Warren, to his credit, did well in the passing game, but his first carry was a negative 2-yard run. He had a couple more later in the game, but there just wasn't room in this game. It wasn't a who's better thing. It was neither player has any chance to do anything. And if you can't get the run game going consistently with this offense, it just isn't going to work. We've talked about it before. Matt Canada wants to live in 2nd and 5, 3rd and 3. That's what he's trying to get to. Now, again, we all know, and the rest of the league knows, that's stupid in the modern NFL. It just is. We can say that. It's not a good strategy to try to purposely get into 3rd and 3, 2nd and 5. It's never, you don't want to have to get first downs every single time. You want to be able to get a first down in the first play if you're able to. You want to create explosives. Matt Canada thinks that's overrated, I guess. I don't know what that's about. Point is, if that's what he's trying to do, if this line cannot block significantly better in both the pass, but especially the run game in this particular scenario, it just is not going to work. And to Kenny's credit, one of the problems that has happened really for his whole career so far, Ben's last year, is we have so many 3rd and 10s, 3rd and 11s, 3rd and 8s. We just don't, because we're not able to run the ball well, we're constantly behind the chains. And then you're asking, in case of Ben, before he retired, an old aging quarterback, and now a newer quarterback that's young, to make plays on difficult 3rd downs, and it's just not easy. Even the best players in the sport don't do as well, obviously, when they have to get 10 yards instead of 4. So until the offense can get going in the running game, I think we're going to probably continue to see Pickett struggle a little bit, because it's really hard to consistently perform on 3rd and 10, and that's what he's going to be getting most of the time if the run game isn't going to be working. What do you think, Tommy?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a disaster. It's been an utter disaster so far. And I agree with you. I mean, that's what I've been saying for several years now, is you can't live to get in 3rd and manageable. Try to get a first down every play. I mean, that's the mindset that a lot of these good offenses have, is let's try to get a first down every play. And obviously, when you run the football, that's not going to happen every time. But living to get into a 3rd and manageable situation, eventually that's going to stall. Like if you're starting at the 25-yard line and you're trying to march the distance of the field to get a touchdown, you're not going to convert every single 3rd down. And we saw that obviously with the Steelers, even with trying to get in 3rd and manageable, they were 4 of 14 on 3rd down conversions on Monday Night Football, which is horrendous. And so you cannot have that kind of ratio at all. And Shayne, the Steelers have the worst EPA ever recorded right now. It's a stat that's dating back to 2009, and their offensive EPA, their collective EPA, even because their offense is so bad, is the worst ever recorded. And it should just shows you how bad they are on a play-to-play basis. This cannot continue. They got to find something else here. They got to go with something else. You talked about the running backs, offensive line a little bit. It's interesting with Najee, like the explosive runs and like the negative runs. That's like almost what you would expect out of like an Anthony McFarland type guy, where you get some big plays and you get some stuff for loss. I cannot blame the running backs a fraction as much as I can blame the offensive line right now, because the line has been awful these first 2 games.
And it sucks because it's
granted they've had some really tough matchups, but
yeah,
we certainly did. And now I'm watching some of like Brian Baldinger's cut-ups here, and it makes me wonder how big of a problem Pat Meyer is as well, because you watch that goal line run that they had, the Steelers trying to convert there, and they're like reach blocking and positional blocking when you should be smacking the helmet of the guy in front of you and driving him forward so that you can get that 2-yard lunge that you need. And so I have no idea what they're doing. Some of these things are kind of bizarre to me. I think they try to move their guys around too much to do some of that reach blocking stuff, and they end up getting burnt by it. Somebody misses an assignment, whatever the case may be. Get a hat on a hat. If you're talented enough, dominate the guy in front of you. And I think that it's very warranted now to ask for change on the offensive line, and to ask, I don't know, maybe say your first round pick to get in there, the guys you traded up 14th overall to select, instead of keeping your mid 4th rounder from a few years back, who has played horrendously these first couple of games. And Dan Moore had the 3.5 pass block grade, a 21 overall grade from Dan Moore, just disgusting football. And you could see that. And I will say this, I'm going to give some props to Myles Garrett here. So cover your ears if you're not ready for this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Please. I always try to urge fans, be super careful about being a box score checker.
Yes.
Because although Watt obviously dominated Garrett in the box score, had the fumble recovery, the touchdown, had the sack, which broke the record. And again, Watt's performance was awesome, not taken away from that. He was chipped all the time. And I thought Day One did an awesome job on him.
He handled him very well with his size.
He did. The guy's enormous. And so Watt had trouble kind of getting the bull rush work in there. At the same time, I think Myles Garrett played a really, really good game against the Steelers. And this doesn't show up in the box score. You see like the 1 tackle and no sacks and whatever else. You can watch the film. And what does the eye test tell you? Like Garrett was in the backfield a lot. It's why Pickett was getting hit. Garrett could have had a sack. Pickett flipped the one away as he was going to the ground. And so Garrett had a much better game. So the people post, if you just post like Watt's stats compared to Garrett's stats, Watt's are obviously going to look better. And so I will give Garrett some props here. I think that Garrett is a phenomenal football player. They have different skill sets. I think that Garrett is the guy who can more consistently get to the quarterback at a faster than TJ Watt can. But I think Watt does a lot of things better than Garrett in terms of his splash play ability, batting passes down, forcing fumbles, all that kind of stuff, the stuff that the Watts always do. And so little props to him right there. But it was a tough matchup. 2 weeks in a row, you get some of the most talented defensive fronts. And so I'm hoping it gets a little bit easier from here, but you would like to see the Steelers offense perform better against those type of units.
Right. So this is the ultimate crux of the issue, right? Is like we can sit here and say, okay, they had two very, very difficult matchups to start the season with a new offensive line makeup this year with Ciamala being added and everything else, right? And that is totally true. That there is something to be said about these two. These guys have to get acclimated to each other. There's going to be some issues right away, and it's a tough start. However, Dan Moore straight up cannot play right now. And this is really the issue with and why we drafted Broderick Jones, right? Is Dan Moore has a certain ceiling as a player, and you were hoping that ceiling was a capable starting left tackle and eventually a capable starting right tackle when a core four leaves, right? That was what the hope is. So far, he's not a capable anything. Like that's just what it is. Now it's 2 games. I don't think we're going to see a switch immediately because of a lot of reasons, but primarily because of how difficult the matchups have been. But if we go play the Raiders, and granted, Max Crosby's great and everything, he's going to get moved around. But if we go play the Raiders and we cannot do anything offensively and the line cannot pass protect at all, someone's losing their job. I don't know who it's going to be, but someone's definitely losing their job at this point, right?
Mm-hmm.
The interior should have a great day because apparently right now I was looking at it. The Raiders defensive tackles have accomplished nothing through 2 games at all, and the interior defensive linemen in general. So it's really going to be about the pass protection on the edge. Can they keep that going and get that going against Max Crosby? But if this line cannot, especially get the run game going and then protect Kenny Pickett significantly better than they have so far, people are going to start losing their jobs. And it's probably going to be more just based on his performance so far because that would allow Jones to come in. But something is going to have to change. And Pickett himself, again, he hasn't helped himself that much. There's been some plays where he kind of scrambled around and forced pressure onto himself. But he is right now more uncomfortable than we've seen him at any point in his young career. And that is a huge concern going into his second season when he showed a lot of that pocket presence throughout camp, in the preseason. Again, the preseason looks more and more like a facade, and I understand that. But he showed some of the stuff that you wanted to see him grow with. And until they can kind of get that pass rush taken care of and be able to handle it better, you're probably going to continue to see him be inconsistent because the accuracy, the timing of everything is just off. And a lot of that is going to come from the pressure that he's facing. Now, you're hoping if he does get some clean pockets, if he's still missing throws that he's been missing so far, then we have to start having a conversation about what exactly is the problem with him, because inaccuracy was never really a concern for him in college last year. That was never his problem. It was, play calling, which again was definitely worse this game, I would say, overall than it was against the Niners. Like the Niners, we weren't going to win that game regardless, probably, but there was plays to be made. This game, outside of the missed throws from Kenny, there was a lot of just issues with the play calling, especially in the run game. Like whatever, that 3rd and short at the end of the game, what were we doing?
Mm-hmm.
Like just sneak it or something. Like because at least like you have a better chance of getting it than whatever they were trying to do there. Stuff like that. But again, Pickett's inconsistency is definitely, I think, the biggest concern for this offense outside of the offensive line play so far.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more because, I mean, Pickett he's just been one of the least efficient quarterbacks so far this year. It is a 2-game sample. It's coming against really good defenses. But, I mean, he is ranking near the bottom of the league in everything, EPA, adjusted EPA, net yards, all that kind of stuff. And it's not hard to see why. I mean, the offensive line is obviously a major issue here, Shayne. But what concerns me so badly is once you lose that confidence as a quarterback,
it's hard to get it back.
I mean, it's so hard. And rarely does that player ever get that confidence back. Like you have to have that mindset that nothing is going to phase you. And I thought that Pickett was going to be like that. I really did. I watched him down the stretch last year. I thought he was going to be that guy that maybe just had that it factor to his game that wasn't phased by anything. Watching him in these first 2 games, Shayne, he looks so skittish back there. He's not comfortable throwing the ball. You can see him after he gets hit a few times and he's just releasing the ball really quick, but it's really inaccurate and it's behind or low on the hip or out in front, whatever it is. And we've seen some major accuracy issues over these past 2 weeks. I know in the first week, he was credited with 10 inaccurate passes, which is a lot for one game. So, and I didn't see what the number was this time around, but I know I can picture some in my head already that
7 or 8, I would assume.
Yeah, it was not a good performance. It was not a good performance at all. And so they go a little bit hand in hand. The offensive line has to play so much better because obviously there wasn't a lot of opportunity. And you could see even the massive play to George Pickens. He Pickett stuck in there and took a
Yeah,
shot. That was
that
his
was
best play
probably
of the game.
that was his best in terms of like handling the pressure and throwing the
Mhm.
ball accurately because that was right on him perfectly to keep him running. But again, like there was so few of that. There's the other bigger play to Pickens that he scrambled out of the pocket and fired
Yeah,
it 25 yards down the field. Like there was moments, right? And that's the
there
reason
were.
I'm not willing to say that he's not like he can't salvage his confidence or they
Mhm.
can't play better because you still see
Yeah,
moments where he fires the ball in there. The Calvin Austin throw for earlier in the game for a first down was also really
mhm.
nice on time, solid throw. Like it's just the inconsistency that's what has to change, and part of
Yeah,
that's going to come with playing more throughout the season and the offensive line hopefully improving. But outside of Pickens, who made plays for this team really, like in general, like it just didn't really happen. And Pat Freiermuth, where's he at? Like, what are we doing
yeah,
with this? That's something I wanted to make sure we talk about too before we finish up here. And we're gonna look ahead and kind of look at what we can hope for the next couple games. But there's no way you can like make any argument to me that this man shouldn't have 15 plus targets through 2 games, and he has 5.
mhm.
I don't understand offensively how, because especially if Kenny isn't getting through his progressions that well, that means that he's locking onto his first read a lot of the time. And if that's the case, why is Pat not his first read more often right now? Especially in this game where you don't have Deontay, you're facing a defense that showed out against the receivers the week before. Why is he not a bigger part of the game plan? Like, there's so many things we could talk about with Matt Canada, right? And I want to give you a chance, obviously, to talk about it.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, the sport is way more difficult to him than it seems like it should be. Like it feels like he's playing the game on hard mode. And I don't understand how he can look at his offense, look at what this team should be able to do well, and go out there and call the games that he's been calling for the past 2+ years. I legitimately, and I'm gonna sit here and like people will say like I see on Twitter, like, former players or other things, sometimes they're for it, like they're defending him, sometimes they're not. But they always say like, oh well, you wouldn't do better. I'm like, I don't care if I'll do better. Why would I be able to do better? Like
Mhm.
I can still criticize the guy. It's not hard to see what's going on here. Like
Yeah,
it's just not that hard. Like I know like basic principles of playing offense, and he seems like he either doesn't or doesn't believe in
mhm.
them. And I'm like, how do you treat a tight end that is easily a top 10 player at his position like he doesn't exist? But yeah, what do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I think Steelers have hit rock bottom with their play calling on offense. I really do, Shane. I
Yeah,
think that
it's just
I've
so bad.
hated Matt Canada's passing concepts from the beginning.
Yeah.
One thing I thought he at least did well in the past was some of his run fits, and
Yes.
even those, like I question when he pulls those out. You talked
Yeah,
about the
it's
trying to get the conversion there, and you've got Pickett kind of like in shotgun trying to roll
yeah,
to his right to get that. I'm like, go straight up the middle, do the Eagles QB sneak, have 2 guys pushing from
something.
behind, like. It's not too hard to watch other teams and kind of pick up some of the things that they do well. And so it's so infuriating, Shane. And I want to give an example. I'll go back and look at the offensive line here. And one person in specific, Isaac Seumalo, we've seen this guy on the Eagles
Yeah.
be a really, really rock solid football player his whole career. And then he comes to Pittsburgh, and all of a sudden he looks like one of the worst guards in football. There is more than a talent issue going on here.
Yes.
This starts with coaching, like Tomlin kind of alluded to already. Is Pat Meyer, Matt Canada. There's no reason, and again, who you're wedged between matters a lot too. So there is
It
a
does.
talent issue for sure. There's that element because going from Jordan Mailata and a Hall of Fame center now to you're between Mason Cole and Dan Moore. That's a big drop off. But I'm not convinced, and I've seen a lot of Seumalo tape prior to him coming to the Steelers. He's not that bad of a football player,
No,
folks. Like,
he
he's
isn't.
really not.
He's not.
There are bigger, deeper issues going on here, and the Steelers got to get this figured out. I mean, it's going to help when Broderick gets in there and becomes a stable presence at some point. It's going to help him out a little bit, but that's just one example of. And you look at the offense as a whole, like it is talent and it is coaching. It's a combination of the two, and they're kind of feeding off each other in a negative way right now because the Steelers just can't get anything going on offense. And Shane, if it was up to me, if I could make the choice today, Canada's gone. He's out of there. I do not care. That I will not let you play through the rest of your contract this year. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. You are out of there. Sayonara. This is year 3. And there's no more excuses. I know that Deontay wasn't there this time, but no more excuses. It's not just him. Pickett looks bad too. It's a collection of things. I'm ranting right now because I'm frustrated. I don't care that
This is what the show's for, Tom. This is why we do this one, so it could be a little bit more open about it. Yeah,
I like being able to do that. I know that Pickett is early into his career as well, but we can't see these performances anymore. I can't see another 12-point performance with ugly play. Like, I need to see a 30-point game from the Steelers offense without a defensive score chipped in. I want to see a 30-point game. The Steelers have the longest drought of any team in the league. You can't win like this. I mean, it might be good enough, like it has been the last couple of years, might be good enough to get you like the 500-ish record range. You are not going to be able to beat a single playoff team with this mindset. You need to start scoring points. And I think it's got to start with the coordinator. I think you need a change in the offense coordinator. I don't see Steelers doing it. They're just so strong-willed that way, and they have a particular way of doing business. But I'm frustrated after a win, and I don't remember feeling like this after wins very often, Shayne.
And this is, I think, the crux of the issue, Tommy, is we're both out on this show post-game. This is one day after the game, and we're not happy with it. We won the game, and we cannot, because we know that, guess what? This defense could be phenomenal, right? And they had their warts even this game, and especially in the first game. They could end up being phenomenal this year. They could score touchdowns multiple times the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. You're not going to win doing this. You cannot expect your defense, as talented as they may be. You could have one of the best players in the NFL in TJ Watt on your defense. You could have Alex Highsmith, who's maybe one of the best number twos in the league, especially so far this year.
Yeah.
You cannot expect them to just go score for you like they did in this game.
Yeah.
Like, if they didn't do what they did, we score 12 points and we lose. And if you're Tomlin at this point, like, we all understand the type of coach that Tomlin is. We know what he's capable of as a leader and all these things. I understand it may not truly be up to him, and it's coming from management, it's coming from other things. You have to put your foot down, and you have to walk into whoever's office you have to walk into and tell them, my football team cannot function with this man coordinating my offense, and be done with it and figure out whoever it's going to be. I don't care who ends up calling the plays, whose job it is, whatever. Something has to be done about this, and it's going to happen next year. We know it's not going to happen until next year. But the whole argument going into the season for why, like, oh, maybe it's best to let Canada have one more year is because Pickett was coming up in his system as a rookie. He looked better down the stretch. But the problem is, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you have the same offensive coordinator for 2 years or 3 years if the offensive coordinator is bad. It does just what it is, what it means. Like, it doesn't help you to be coached poorly for 3 years, opposed to be coaching poorly for one and then maybe being coached poorly again, but at least you try something else. Like that.
Yeah, but at least they have continuity.
Exactly, the continuity, right? The C word is what I'm gonna start calling it. Yeah, I'm gonna start calling it the C word, and people will think I'm talking about something else. But the problem with it again is, like, everyone around the league knows this. Like, there's a lot of people that really have a lot of respect for this football team, this organization, who could not bring it upon themselves to put us in the playoff picture prior to the season, not because of the talent on the team necessarily, not because they didn't believe that Mike Tomlin could do it, but because they know that they have a big roadblock right in the middle of their team every single week, and he coaches for them. Like, it's a problem that we all know about. At this point, everybody's very well aware of it. We talk about it a lot. But at some point, if it doesn't change this year, who's going to be the offensive coordinator next year? Are they just going to promote someone again? Is it just going to be a promotion situation? Are they actually going to go look for somebody who can try to do something with this core? And one thing I want to talk about, last thing before we move into our last section here, because I don't want it to go too long for everybody. Najee Harris is at his core, what he should be is a guy that is a power back, right? And I understand sometimes he tries to be too cute with things and all that stuff, whatever. Why are we running him from shotgun every single time? And people are like, oh, why isn't he running with more power? It's really hard to get going as a 240-pound back when you're running from shotgun. It just is. Like, Jaylen Warren, yeah, run him from shotgun. Makes total sense. He's quick. He can get going quickly. Not going to be really a hindrance on his game. Why are we not having Najee as a single back? Like, what are we, like, again, if you're Matt Canada, you know what he is as a player. You've coached him for 2 years now, going on 3 now this year. How do you not know that this guy, if you give him a head of steam and let him get up to speed, he's a load to tackle. Like, it's just, this is not hard stuff. Like, what
And
are
it's
we
not even
doing?
just running him from shotgun, Shayne. They're running him east and west too.
I
Like
know
you're trying to
the
bounce him
two
outside tackle
sweeps
all
on
the
the
time.
first two run plays. Like, what are we trying to do here?
Yeah, I'm saying I think Najee does have his traits. He has his niche, and he is good at ripping off tackles and stiff arming
Yes.
people to the ground. Like if he's going to be good, if Najee is going to succeed here, it has to be the way that you just described, Shayne. But running the guy east and west, I mean, you can tell on the film he is not a fast player in respect to his position by any stretch of the imagination, and so that's not how he's going to win. Now he made some things happen with nothing a little bit last night with two really nice runs. But you're right. He is being misused. He should not be that guy. He's not a scat back. He's not a
No,
guy that you want doing those type of things.
he is a slow starter, right? When he
Yeah,
gets up
yeah.
to speed, his speed is not that bad. We've seen, like, he turned the corner on that run that he brought back the other way and got going pretty well. He's very similar in terms of his speed. Like, Henry's much faster at his fastest gear, but they're both slow starters, right? And again, they're 240 pounds. Of course they're slow starters. Like, if you're going to ask him to run east and west, it's going to take him a little while to get out there. Now, if the blocking's good enough and he gets out there, yeah, now he's a load. Now he's a 240-pound missile that you can't tackle. But it's just hard to do that consistently, especially if your offensive line isn't playing well. And it frustrates me because you see, like, it reminds me of DeMarco Murray when he is his deep cut. I know people are gonna be like, what are you talking about? When DeMarco Murray signed with the Eagles back in like 2013, 14, whatever it was, and they were a primarily shotgun running team, he was dreadful for them because guess what? He is a get up to speed, one cut and go running back. And as soon as he went to Tennessee, then he was a much better player. And it's very similar to me in the sense that, like, they don't seem to know the skill sets of their own players. And how that's possible for a guy who's coached these guys for multiple years, I think that's really all I need to say, right?
Hey
Like,
Shayne, how about get Calvin Austin in a drag route? Maybe?
something?
I mean, let him try to use his 4.3 speed after the catch. Like these are the types of things. How about use Freiermuth over the middle of the field? I think that there are so many things that we can point to, and you can go across every single skill player, and we know we've seen them enough to know what their best traits are here, and not taking advantage of that is just mind-boggling to me that they're not trying to take their niches and capitalize on that. But carry on.
I've never seen anybody make the sport look harder than Matt Canada makes the sport. Like, it's really mind-boggling. Like, it's crazy to me that he has this much trouble just getting something out of these guys. And, like, again, the players have to execute the plays. And I'm not sitting here and saying, oh, they're executing his plays perfectly and they're still bad. But maybe if the plays weren't so bad, it wouldn't matter as much if you miss on a few of them. And I think that's the thing that people forget sometimes is, like, when they're talking about, like, oh, the play calling wasn't that, like, there's guys open. I'm like, it doesn't really matter because the guys that are getting open most of the time are guys that are trying to get you to third and manageable all the time, like you said. There's a reason why, if you're not perfect, this offense is so bad because you have to be in order for it to be passable. Like, other offenses that are great, they have ways to get out of bad situations. They have the ability to not have to always be perfect and still be able to make things happen because they know in the NFL, guess what? The other team is also probably pretty good. So they're not going to let you do everything you want to do. Right. Like, I think Matt thinks he's in college still. He's playing like Rutgers every week. Like, that's what he acts like. And I'm like, buddy, Rutgers isn't walking through that tunnel. Like, it's going to be the Cleveland Browns who are much better this year. It's going to be even the Raiders next week won their first game and played well defensively against the Broncos, who scored 35 points last week. Like, the Raiders defense isn't good, but does it matter if they're good or not right now? Like, I don't know. And then we're going to talk about it here, like, looking ahead and moving forward from this. It's if the offense over the next 2 weeks, you're playing the Raiders who just got blown out again by the Bills, but whatever. They still got blown out. They allowed 38 points. Then you play the Texans who, while looking more like a true football team, have still allowed, almost 60 points through 2 games. If you cannot score, I'm going to say 24 plus points against both those teams offensively. If you can't score 24 plus points, then one, you're probably going to lose one of the games, right? Like, realistically, especially like the Texans offense looked pretty solid in their game against the Colts. CJ Stroud looks legit so far. Like, if you can't score 24 plus points in both of those games, you're probably going to lose one or both of them. And if they don't do it against those teams, I don't know if they're going to do it against any teams this year. Like that.
Yeah, Shayne, if you don't do that, I mean, you've had your 2 warm-up games, right?
Yes.
Both of them came at home. The last one came in prime time. these are two bad defenses on paper that you're going up against these next 2 weeks. You're right. If you can't score 24 points, you can kiss averaging that goodbye, which would be, I mean, that'd be a solid offense, something Steelers haven't seen in a while.
Right. Yeah.
You're going to be miserable this year. And so you have to make something happen. Like, don't settle for the game plan of, we're going to barely do enough to get by and we're going to try to win one of these field goal type games. Like, you need to pour it on. You really do. You got to show that you're something, because honestly, if that's not what you're here for, and you're just in the business of selling tickets and you don't care about winning football games, I mean, you have to have the mindset of, I want to get into the playoffs. And when I get into the playoffs, I want to be able to smash some other teams because our team is that good. The Steelers do not look like that at all right now, Shayne. And if I had some advice for Matt Canada right now, like, I was sitting down and talking to him, and as kindly as possible, I would say, Matt, could you please, and I would very, very strongly encourage you to sit down and watch the Dolphins since Mike McDaniel has come there, because you can see what a good offensive mind can do for a scheme. Now, granted, the Dolphins have excellent personnel to go with it.
Right.
Excellent personnel. You got the fastest receiving core in NFL history. At the same time, Shayne, Tua was a quarterback that there were whispers that they were going to ship him away for a second-round pick. I mean, the guy was averaging just over 6 yards an attempt his first 2 years. Very Pickett-like start to his career. And then all of a sudden you go and he's like top in line for MVP voting. And he was last year too, before he got injured. Your play calling matters. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. And no, Canada's not to blame for every single thing that goes wrong with the Steelers.
Not everything.
There's still a talent gap between the top teams and the Pittsburgh Steelers, obviously. But the play calling and the coaching matters so much that if you get a poor offensive mind in there, that's about one of the worst things that can happen to your franchise. It really is, because I do think that if Pickett had a chance before, they are wasting that window and he will not succeed in this current state. And so it goes both ways. It's a two-way street, and Pickett might just be bad. But I think that it's more so to blame on Canada and just not getting that offense to where it needs to be.
Yeah, and I think that the worst part about all this, Tommy, before we head out here, is that as much as Kenny hasn't helped himself, I cannot evaluate him properly. We got a friend in the background. We cannot evaluate him properly with Canada calling plays. Like, that's part of the reason why. Yeah, we'll let Tommy hang out here for a second, but we can't evaluate Kenny properly, and really any quarterback properly, until you have the right scheme around him and the right players. Because unless you're, and I'll let Tommy jump in here before I continue. Unless you have the right scheme around your players, unless you're one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL, right? It's really hard to know if you're truly a capable starter or not until you have the right scheme around you, Tommy. Like, and as much as, like, again, Kenny's not playing well. I'm not going to sit here. There's going to be a quarterback report card on stillcurtain.com here soon from me that I do every week. I'm not going to be grading him well. He wasn't good. But again, kind of what the Bears have done with Justin Fields. Like, right now, Justin Fields is proving he probably isn't the guy, unfortunately. But they've given him everything except for the play calling, right? Like, the play calling is still bad there. So the players are better, the players around him are better, but the play calling is still bad. So again, is he truly bad? I think there's some things about his game that make it really hard for him to play well. But I think it's doable with the right play calling. Same thing with Kenny. Like, he has his own issues, but if he can fix his accuracy issues and that goes away this year, he's going to be looking really good within the confines of this offense. It's just, how well can he play with it? It's just, no one really knows at this point.
And you said it, Shayne, these next couple of games, like, this is a great test for the Steelers. Like, try to pour it on. You are playing against a couple of bad defenses. Yes. You're going to be on the road, and that's okay, but you should not be facing anywhere near the Jim Schwartz, Myles Garrett defense we just saw, or the Nick Bosa 49ers defense we just saw it in the week prior to that. I mean, this is going to be much more chill. If you don't have a pocket now, I mean, fire that offensive line to the moon, because you should be able to get something going on offense. And we look specifically at this coming week, Sunday Night Football against the Raiders. If your game plan is not the same as what the Browns and Stefanski came out against you and say, yes, no, that's not TJ Watt over there, it's Max Crosby, but I'm going to chip him every single play, and I'm going to make other guys on this football team beat us. If the Steelers don't have that game plan, I'm going to be furious, because Crosby will get his if you're going to leave him one-on-one. So if they do that to him, and if you chip him like the Browns did against TJ Watt in this past game, you're going to have a pocket, and we will see then what Canada and Pickett can conjure up together collectively. Can we get a 30-point game? Can we get a 30-point game with these two together? That's going to be the question.
I certainly hope so. And I will say, and we'll talk more about it on our show tomorrow, which I'll remind you guys of in a second here. But before we get out of here, if I'm Canada and I'm the Steelers Sunday night, I am coming out in 12 personnel. I am putting Darnell Washington on the same side as Max Crosby every single time that I can. Like you said, I'm going to chip him and we are going to throw, but I'm going to try to run for 200 yards on this team. Their interior is soft. They've not played well. And I'm coming out, and again, I want to run some actual power runs from not out of shotgun with Najee. And I'm trying to get downhill, and I'm going to try to punish this team with my run game. Because if you can get that going, again, it's just you have to find a way to relieve the pressure, whether it's the offensive line playing better, which you can't really guarantee, whether it's the running game, which, again, unfortunately, you can't guarantee because of how it's gone so far. Something has to be done to take some pressure off this passing game, especially with Deontay being out. Like, you have to find some way to give Kenny a pocket. And if it's not going to be with pass blocking, then it's got to be making them respect the run more and devoting more resources to that. Something has to be done. So again, if we don't see it next week, I'm going to say we probably won't see it at all. But yeah, we'll talk more about that on the show tomorrow. Which again, that'll do it for us here today, folks. You can catch a new episode of the Curtain Call every Tuesday. I'm going to drop that around 5 p.m. is the goal, so you should be looking for it then. Don't forget to tune into our live show every week on Wednesdays at 1:30 p.m. where we go over that week's game and with a little less, rantiness going on, a little bit more just straight up, what happened, what didn't happen. And then we'll preview, obviously, the Raiders game coming up here on Sunday Night Football. And you can follow Tommy Jaggi again at Tommy Jaggi on Twitter. Same thing with me here. You can follow me at Shayne Kubas, same as our names here. Make it easy for you. And we'll see you guys next time. And, of course, after win, go Steelers.